Hello, everyone. Welcome to Iran 1400's Spotlighting an Author event. Today, we will be discussing Mateo Mohammad Farzaneh's Iranian Women and Gender in the Iran-Iraq War. We are also honored to have with us Dr. Saeidi as a discussant. For those of you who are new to the project, the goal of the Iran 1400 project is to encourage healthy and productive conversations that make a constructive contribution to better understanding Iran. The project aspires to educate people broadly about Iran with analysis of its recent past and present in order to encourage the Iranian people to reflect on what future they want for the country. Before we introduce our guest, our communications manager, Tabi Anvari, will share remarks on behalf of the advisory board.
Thank you, dear Sydney. Dr. Farzaneh, on behalf of the advisory board and the team at Iran 1400 Project, we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. As was mentioned, the Iran 1400 Project's mission is to foster a greater understanding of Iran's history during the past century in order to promote an informed conversation about Iran's future. We're honored to have you with us today to share your research and insight on the Iranian experience. We also want to extend that gratitude to Dr. Saeidi for joining the conversation today and look forward to a lively conversation. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Tabi. All right. Before we begin, I'm honored to tell y'all about Dr. Farzaneh, our guest today. An Iranian native, Mateo Mohammad Farzaneh attended high school and college in southern Iran. After spending 7 years in nursing and healthcare industries, his curiosity led him to pursue a higher education in history. He received his master's degree from California State University, Fullerton, and he received his master's degree from California State University, Fullerton, his doctoral degree in 2010 at UC Santa Barbara. He is quadrilingual, speaking Persian, English, Spanish, and Arabic. He's a recipient of a number of prestigious awards and fellowships. He taught world and Middle Eastern history at Santa Barbara City College and California State Fullerton before joining Northeastern Illinois University's history faculty in 2010. We have a new format today, so for those of us who have come here before, things will be a little different. We will be listening to Dr. Farzaneh present his book for around 20 minutes. Then after that, we will actually have a discussion between Dr. Farzaneh and Dr. Shirin Saeidi for another 20 minutes. And then after that, we will have 20 minutes for Q&A. For the Q&A, y'all can submit your questions to the Q&A section in the Zoom, or y'all can send your questions to media@iran1400.org. We have a quick teaser, and then we will begin. Dr. Farzaneh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin and Sydney, I'm sorry. And thank you, Iran 1400 for extending the invitation. This was very kind of you. And of course, Tabi Anvari, who contacted me initially to do this, and Matin Kornawasi for organizing, as well as, of course, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Shirin Saeidi, for accepting to go through the pain of organizing, I guess, doing this. I really appreciate it. I know she's very, very busy with her schedule at Arkansas, and I'm very grateful for her taking the time to do this. So I have a little PowerPoint. I'm told I have about 20 minutes. So I'm going to set my clock here just to make sure I don't go over that. And I'll stop right at 20 minutes. Hopefully we'll get everything together by then. All right. So there are so many things we can talk about this book and about Iranian women and gender, obviously, and about the war separately or in conjunction with the subject of women and gender. And of course, a book does not do justice to completely go over everything that needs our undivided attention. But at the same time, we have to start somewhere, right? So I do not consider this book to be the first and the last sort of the scholarly work that needs to be done on these topics. It's just the beginning. And I'm hoping sincerely that younger scholars will jump in and continue this work, because I think it's so very important to not only understand Iranian women and gender, their history from a variety of perspectives, but also from the perspective of those that want to know about the marginalized women or women that we don't necessarily pay attention to for a variety of reasons. And we can talk about that during our discussion, I guess. And of course, the Iran-Iraq War is the least studied of the past events in Iran since the Islamic Revolution, since 1979. And I think it deserves a lot more, simply because we are living the consequences of that war right now as we speak. So many of the institutions, so many of the issues that are, keeping Iran down and pushing it further to the cliff, so to speak, to the proverbial cliff, stem from the war and what happens in the war and in the process. So let's just begin with that. The general rule that I like to always point out is that for every male who fights a war, we have a war going on in several places in the world right now. One that everybody knows about is the war in Ukraine. So for every man that actually is fighting that war, there's at least one, the mother of that man, but more than likely 2, 3, 4, even more, who help him fight it, because all of these elements of fighting in the front lines and putting your life on the line for whatever it is that you're believing in and you're fighting for, all of these come together because the families pay for that sort of decision that a man makes to get involved in a war. And the Iran-Iraq war is no exception. So that is probably one of the most important messages that I wanted this book to give to its intended audience, and that is not to look at wars specifically from a male perspective or from a masculine perspective that kind of allows and reserves those great accolades of bravery and shahamat and shahadat and those things that they always talk about. It's not only reserved for men, but it's also reserved for women, and we'll see how that is discussed in the book, and I'll try to cover some of those points. So for those of us who might not know about the war was the longest war of the 20th century, conventional war. The Iran-Iraq War was fought from 1980 to 1988. One of its most important significances is that it solidified the Islamic Republic beyond anybody's imagination. It would have been a totally different environment, although we can't go counterfactual, but I think we can say with a certain amount of confidence that the war did establish the Islamic Republic the way it is today, the way it's behaving and operating domestically and internationally. I argue that over 800,000 women actually directly participated in the war. And I'm not even counting the women that were not involved as much as probably these 800,000 people. How did I come up with that number? 837,918. I got an average number of the casualties. These are casualties of men, 208,000. And these are the casualties of women, actual women that were killed in the war. These are the number of the injured. These are the number of women that were injured, so about 1%. We had over 43,000 POWs. Officially, they've said we had 41 women POWs or prisoners of war, and some other sources say the number is much more, it's about 171. And the number of the MIA, missing in action, revolves around 12,000, close to 12,000. This number keeps going down because more and more discoveries basically allow us to exhume bodies that have been buried in various places inside Iraq by the Ba'athi army when the war was raging. So sometimes they find mass graves of, let's say, 50, 60, 70 people, 800, 100 people, sometimes less. But so this number is as of the date of the publication of the book. So the average number for this is 837,000, right? And I'm saying that every single one of these men that were actually captured or injured or killed, martyred in the war, there was a woman involved in that war. And we cannot disregard that fact because fighting a war, as I said, doesn't just involve the person who's carrying the gun or shooting from an airplane or whatever. It involves a woman that actually did the grunt of work that was necessary to for that man to go to war, and we'll explain a little bit more. The official line, one thing that we should understand also, that the war story, the story of the war in Iran, is an exclusive genre or an exclusive field of what the Islamic Republic does. Essentially, they have taken the war narrative and they've made it a state narrative, and that's the official line. Most of the work that comes out in Iran is sponsored by the government in a variety of ways, and it's not always financial. So from that perspective, this official war narrative actually is an all-war narrative, all-male war narrative, meaning that women really don't find space in it. Women had to work very, very hard to kind of dig in, to kind of let the world know that actually we're right here, right? We did the fighting as well in a variety of ways, and that's what this book tries to highlight. The war narrative also tries to give the perception that men were protecting the realm and women were just in the periphery or in the background of the war. So I challenge that. Women reproduce and offer their children. That's what the state keeps saying. Even today, as we commemorate the war at the beginning of fall in September every year, I challenge that as well. They were not just reproducing children, giving their children to the war. They did much, much more than that. Women took care of family while men fought. That is very true. But at the same time, they didn't just take care of the family. They went into spaces and into fields that they never imagined they would be responsible for before the war started. One thing that was really startling when I started researching for this book was that out of 20,000 plus articles that the media had dedicated to the war from September 22nd, 1980, when the war started, to July of 1988, out of 20,187 articles, only 93 articles, and you see the percentage right here, it's a ridiculous low amount of articles that actually mentions women. And if I were to add another bullet point to this, out of the 93 articles that mention some form of women involvement in the war, I would say 90 to 92, 3% of them mostly talked about this role of woman, a woman reproducing and offering their children, taking care of the domestic household. And they would never actually talk about the part of the war that women got involved in, that is over 17, 18 roles that I discussed in the book. So in the interest of time, I usually talk about women and gender in Iran and its history, the challenges, how we challenge in the book, the narrative of the war, what sources I've used. I want to focus on that more probably for this audience. I want to also I look forward to a discussion, hopefully with Dr. Saeidi, to talk about how the war actually empowered a group of women that wouldn't necessarily be empowered if the war hadn't happened. And I have an argument for that. We'll discuss that. And what's the difference between this book and other books? We'll talk about that. And if we get time, we'll read a small passage from the book. One of the things that this book does that I think is very unique is that I seldom look into sources that are written by men. Now, having said that, I did look at sources that men had written from their own perspectives, but it's very minimal. That's another work, I think, could be an article or a book by itself, how men actually saw the role of women in the war. The sources that I use predominantly are memoirs that are written by women. I had the privilege of getting some photos of private collections, some of them are in the book, documents such as volunteer forms and letters, identification cards as historical primary sources, audio-video recordings, obviously, and Red Crescent records as well. The thing about these sources is that most of the, a sample of the works that I actually consulted and examined critically, these are not very popular genres in Iran simply because of this reason. Because Islamic Republic has taken an exclusive role of narrating the war, anything associated with it, be it the person, himself or herself, or be it the sources that are written about the war, is automatically associated with the idea that you are associated with the Islamic Republic. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that's a false perception or thought that people have. If you read the book, I do mention a lot of ways when you read the sources that are presumably the works of the Islamic Republic to ideologically drive people to do X, Y, and Z, you will see that not all of these actually writings are specifically ideologically driven. There's a lot of what one might want to call secular, nationalist, patriotic, non-religious sort of mentioning of why these women actually went on to war and participated. There's a lot of references to very unusual ways these women connected their womanhood to, let's say, for example, poetry of Furu Farrokhzad, for example, or the idea of nationalism or patriotism that they actually defined as an Iranian thing and necessarily as an Islamic Iranian factor. So I thought that was really fascinating when I was doing the research for the book, and hopefully this research will entice other scholars to look into the sources that are not usually looked at, simply because of the weight that it carries, that you might be presuming to get into sources that the Islamic Republic wants you to read because you're supportive otherwise. I looked at it from a very apolitical point of view. I just wanted to know what the other side, quote unquote, has to say about their involvement. And it was quite mind-boggling and fascinating to learn about the groups that we don't necessarily want to be associated with for a variety of reasons. I think we'll go over this very quickly. I have about 3 minutes. Most of the works that's been done about women have been done from a very secular, non-religious, modern, whatever you want to call it, perspective. And those women actually don't represent the entire population of Iranian women. The majority of Iranian women before the revolution and now, I do not believe are from the perspectives that people want to think of north of Van Eyck Square. I call them people that are associating themselves with the ideas of modernity, Westernization. The great majority of Iranian women are what I call marginalized women, the topic of my next book, women that you do not hear about, the women that do not have art galleries or exhibitions, the women that do not write, the women that do not get to, promote their works, whatever it is, on social media, what have you. And when the revolution happens, what I discovered in the process of the research was that this great majority of Iranian women that had not participated in the reform movement or the feminist movement or the modernity movement that the Pahlavi monarchy wanted Iranian women to participate, this great population, because of the lack of trust to that modernity that the secular Iranian monarchy wanted to promote, were kept away from these reform movements. And what happens, because the Islamic Revolution, the name is on it, Islamic, the conservative families and the conservative body of Iran actually has a trusting relationship with the state. So when a national crisis under the name of the Islamic Republic happens, women, the same women that would not go to school because they didn't want to remove their hijab, or they had a hard time maybe commingling with people that were not of the same social or economic class, all of these women start participating in the war. And that by itself is absolutely fascinating. And it kind of draws this very complicated portrait of Iranian women and gender that hopefully challenges this perspective that, we should just look at Iranian women from one perspective, and that's from a secular or modernist or Western perspective. And that's my criticism of my own colleagues and scholars in the field of history or in the field of Iranian women and gender, because they look at things from a predominantly very modern perspective, which I think modernity can include the idea of bringing the traditionalist element of any society, and that would make up for a lot of the shortcomings that we see in the scholarship. I'll stop right there. I think I have 30 seconds, but I'll defer that time for our discussion. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing this. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Farzaneh, for that lovely, lovely presentation. Oh, can you see me? Let's see. Okay, there I am. Thank you for that lovely presentation. Appreciate you giving us your time today, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. Before we head to the discussion, I'd like to introduce our discussant, Dr. Shirin Saeidi. Thank you for being with us today. We are honored to have you here as a discussant. Dr. Shirin Saeidi is an assistant professor of political science and an affiliated faculty member of the Middle East Studies program. She earned a BA in Government and Politics from the University of Maryland, College Park, and her PhD in Politics and International Studies from Cambridge University in the UK. She has published numerous articles and book chapters that have appeared in Gender and History, Citizenship Studies, International Journal of Middle East Studies, International Studies Review, and the American Journal of Islamic Social Sciences. Her forthcoming book, Women in the Islamic Republic: How Gendered Citizenship Conditions the Iranian State, is in the final stages of preparation. She is currently researching the global expansion of Hezbollah and the implications of the process for the remaking of transnational hierarchies. Dr. Saeidi, Dr. Farzaneh, y'all can begin your discussion when ready.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's really a great honor and pleasure for me to be in conversation with Dr. Farzaneh. It's not very often that you get to talk to a friend about their books. So I'm quite happy and excited to be here. This book fills an important gap in feminist studies of Iran and the social history of the Iran-Iraq War. And I want to thank you for writing it, first of all. Your book challenges both the way that pious women have been marginalized in Iranian studies, as well as their narrative, the ways in which their experiences have been historicized in the Islamic Republic. So this book makes academic interventions, political interventions. It questions how we think about war and femininity and masculinity. So I thank you. I only have 20 minutes, so I want to get right to my questions. My first question is this. We have had very few Iranian studies scholars that have experienced firsthand the political violence that they write about. We know little about the writing process for that population. You volunteered in the war at 14 and were an eyewitness to much that you discuss in your book. You later returned to do research as a historian and witnessed that history again. What was the interplay between the eyewitness and witness like for you? And then my second question that's closely related, what advice do you have for other writers that are exploring political violence and hoping to write about it, and they've also experienced it firsthand? I think this question is really important because we have a history of trauma and violence in war fronts or prisons, et cetera. So that's my first question.
Thank you. Again, thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm delighted to be in conversation with you, and I look forward to doing more of these, hopefully in the future. Great question. To be involved in a historical event and then writing about that in a scholarly way, not in a memoir way or just a very casual social media entry that some people do, it's very, very different. One of the things in historical studies that we always talk about is that of course, history, memory fades. You remember different things because of the trauma that one goes through. This is true of Holocaust studies. In Holocaust studies, if you look at that, people that were involved or were in concentration camps or were involved in that tragedy always talk about that. In certain ways, the emotional barrier that exists being involved in a war or in a violent event, whatever that might be, kind of blocks things in your brain, in the back of your brain, and you just don't want to remember that because it's so painful. One of the most difficult things researching and then writing about this book was the countless times that I would find myself in front of the screen, typing and crying at the same time, remembering those experiences, and then your memory would start engaging with what you think is the truth, and then comparing it with the evidence that you have or with eyewitness statements that other people are giving you. Sometimes they were radically different, sometimes they were identical to the T. And as a historian, you have to kind of make a decision as to decide what is the truth, right? And when it comes to oral history and eyewitnessing of events, everybody, I think, is in a bind. There is no way for anyone to remember everything exactly. Even we say in historical studies, if we all stand in a intersection and witness an accident, everybody, when the police come, everybody has their own perspective because they look at it from a different angle, as little, as small as those angles might be. It's even worse in that situation if you're in that war and participating in that, and then you want to write about it from historical perspectives is extremely difficult. It is doable, and that takes a lot of discipline to kind of control your emotions and look at it from a very objective point of view. But I'll put this disclaimer out there right now that is impossible to do. If you're a historian, you know that you've read Peter Novak's book. You know, it's a noble dream. It's great to want to do that, but that's impossible because we all have our preconceived notions and our prejudices, obviously. And I'm aware of that. I'm fully aware of that. I'm not going to apologize for it because I'm a human and I've gone through an experience, right? And I cannot take that experience out and say, you know, I'm going to ignore it. I've done my best to corroborate what these women said, right? Or the women that I actually interviewed for the project. I'm trying to corroborate that with hard evidence. And at the same time, part of me wants to say, to challenge those stories, like, no, that's not exactly what happened, or that's not the hour, or that's not the day that these things, or the offensives or the attacks that took place, that's not how it happened. And those are not the number of injured that you're remembering because I was there in the hospital or whatever. That cannot happen because you don't want to obviously upset the people that you're interviewing, but at the same time, you don't want to take everything as the correct version of the truth. The second part of your question, what do I advise? I advise everybody, and you're so right, we've all been traumatized, not only because we've been forced to immigrate because of the situation in Iran. So we have that prejudice already when we talk about Iran, right? Because part of us, the mental part kind of pushes us to look at things from the perspective of immigrants in the United States, that we're free to think and say what we want. And at the same time, we want to stay true to, you know, our native place that we love and we cherish our memories and our heritage and all that stuff. It's incredibly challenging, but I invite everybody to do it because it's sort of a mental exercise to kind of come clean with your past as well, right? It's sort of like therapy. You kind of talk about that. I've talked to several of my students at Northeastern, people that have come back from the Iraq War. And this is several years ago when we had more and more veterans that would take classes. And we would talk about this. I would say, you know, do something that you actually like, and that would be part of your healing process for whatever it is that has happened to you. And that has worked beautifully. It will get them angry. It got me angry. It got me very sad, depressed, upset. But at the same time, as a historian, you come to realize that what's in the past is in the past, right? So let's just get the lessons right. And hopefully that will be a good guiding light for the future. You're muted.
Thank you. So you bring up points about methods and evidence. So this will take us into the next question that I have. In the book, you discuss rape as a part of the history of the war that both participants in the war and the state are not ready to address fully due to cultural taboos. I want to move toward another culturally forbidden topic for a moment. Did you encounter anyone in your research that participated in the war, but also expressed concern about the general condition of women and leftist political prisoners? I ask because we have evidence that some leftist men joined the war front once freed from prison. Did a similar kind of solidarity or even awareness exist among those fighting in war fronts?
Excellent question, Shirin John. The thing about discussing the leftists, and because that it's a garden variety of the leftists, right? It's not just one, because you have your Fadain, you have your Mujahideen, then you have your Marxists, you have your Maoists. So it's all kind of leftists. Which leftists are we talking about? The great majority of the leftists that we're talking about are from Mujahideen Khalq, the MLK, right? Simply because of the fact that some of the Mujahideen essentially joined the Iraqi army to fight against the Iranian forces. The hatred that exists within the veterans circles in Iran that I interviewed, that hatred is quite nominal, quite phenomenal, because one thing that they cannot understand is why would any Iranian want to join, you know, the other side to fight against Iranians. So even if I were to bring that up, everybody would kind of shut off and they wouldn't want to talk about it. And remember, doing social science and humanities research in Iran is like playing Russian roulette. You don't know what kind of question you're going to ask and who's going to be the interviewee, is that going to trigger something and somebody's going to be knocking on your door, the next day, or, making a phone call to want to talk to you. So you're really walking on eggshells in some ways, risking a lot of things. So when I did that with several people, and I actually emailed, or, we had phone conversation with people, especially in Abadan, Khorramshahr, who do say in the book, and I do mention it several times, that they would see the fifth element, women that belong to the fifth element. These would be the women that would work with the Mujahideen and other leftist groups that would actually be the spies for the Ba'athists before Khorramshahr fell and before Abadan was in total surrender. So I think the emotional baggage that goes with it, simply because of what they did by joining the enemy's army, is going to be one obstacle that I don't know how we're going to get over that. I think at some point everybody has to come to terms again with the reality of what it was. I'm not one to hold grudges or hatred forever, but at the same time I do understand those people that they've lost a limb, they've lost their sons, they've lost their family, their livelihood, and I do see how they might perceive those Iranians as a non-starter. We're not going to even talk about them. So when it comes to political prisoners, yes, I have heard the same thing, that some of the leftists would be released from the war and they would go to the war itself. And that actually demonstrates that this war was not an Islamic Republic war. For the Iranians, for myself, and for many people that I knew, with what little we could do at the age of 14 to 16, I thought, because I was born in Ahvaz, so I took it extremely personal that these people that are neighbors would be so audacious to actually launch a war untriggered and unprovoked. So we say in Persian, "Behemun barkhord," right? We're like, how dare somebody would do that to us? So that's one part of it. If you're far from the borders, unlike me, from, let's say, Isfahan or from Khorasan or from Baluchistan or from Gilan or whatever, the issue becomes a patriotic thing. So if you're leftist and you're, let's say, you're from Mazandaran, you're from Gilan or from Ardabil, if you're released and you go to war, yes, you do it, and it's not because of the Islamic Republic. It's because you want your Iran, your nation, the motherland, the fatherland, however you want to look at it from that perspective, you want that to be protected and you want to be part of it, right? So for these women, the amazing thing is that they do this because not only they love Iran, they love their city, they love their town, they're protecting it, but at the same time, they love Islam. And with Masumeh Hormuzi, in a conversation that I had with her, she said something really interesting. She said, what you guys don't understand, talking about me and people that live in the West, she said, you guys don't understand that for us, Iran and Islam are inseparable in some ways. So if we are protecting Iran, we are protecting our Islam, right? And if we are protecting Islam, we're protecting our Iran. So I thought that's a fascinating perspective that needs more attention by scholars everywhere, to look at their perspective and kind of try to critically analyze what they go through. Sometimes is also identical to what we actually go through, but their methodology, the way by which they approach is just different, simply because of their deep beliefs, simply because of their upbringing, and social class has a lot to do with that. We can talk about that too. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I also noticed in my research that the left is just associated with Mujahideen Khalq and the other groups, and that are not recognized broadly within society. When I was doing my research as well, so I can agree with that. So let's move from like the methods and evidence discussion to the discussion of gender in the book. What I want to know is, how does the participation of pious women in the Iran-Iraq War speak to the larger women's rights struggle in modern Iran and post-revolutionary Iran? In particular, I was really touched by, right on page 1, I want to read this because I think it's really beautiful and important. So you go through and you discuss the different activities that women took on during the war. And then you state this: Yet, even though women provided such varied services, men chastised in the process, belittled, beat, threatened, used, and ignored, and eventually forgot them until the women volunteers began speaking out to seek recognition. I can say, as someone who studies gender and women studies within the Iranian context and follows the trends, this is a common sentiment that a lot of Iranian women have, and there's more public discussion about it now. I want to know how you envision the experiences of pious women fitting into the larger struggle for gender justice, equality, recognition, and what you think that their experiences brings to that movement.
Yeah, I still agree with what I said, and thank you for picking that quote, because it says a lot about our lack of understanding from a Western educated Western person who's living in the West from Iran. We kind of associate ourselves with all things Western and modern in our minds, and I think that's how we disregard women that don't think like us or don't look like us or don't play the games that we all play the same way. And that's a shortcoming on us, from our part, I think. And to go back to that quote, this happens simply because the Iranian male culture is extremely, extremely misogynistic, to the point that no matter what the contribution, I don't care if you are a neurosurgeon, if you are the best artist, if you are the best financial wizard in Iran, but if you happen to be a woman, there is, from a male perspective, I can see it, there is that idea of mistrust that, at the end, it's sort of like racism, right? An African American can be doing great things, but at the same time, the racist person is going to think, they're African American, right? At the end of the day, that's how they're going to view things. And I think this is true in women and gender studies too. From a male perspective, I think men don't pay them enough attention because in their minds, and I call it a mental block in essence, in their mind, they're thinking, oh, okay, so they're going to have their woman perspective, and what good is that going to have? Well, the good that it's going to have is that you're going to see a better picture of whatever it is that you're researching, right? Because women are half of the world population. In Iran, that's no different. Actually, they're the great majority by numbers as well. To what extent do they take their place to fight the same inequality that secular women might do? They have their own ways of doing this. If the war hadn't happened, all these conservative women that have written, constantly are written, they're going on TV shows, on radio shows, and talking about their struggles. If the war hadn't happened and they didn't take advantage of this space that they could get in to kind of say, I'm worthy of something and I can actually do something and I'm going to do it pretty well. If that hadn't happened, we would still have this great marginalized group of women that we Westerners will not necessarily see eye to eye. But that didn't happen. They took initiative, they participated. And again, I don't want to say that I agree with everything that happens in Iran, but at the same time, from a scholarly point of view, it's not my job to judge. We all have to kind of see those women with the same lens, with the same perspective that we might view somebody from north of Tehran, from Niavaran or whatever. Just because we might feel comfortable, we might share values that they see, dear and near. If we don't do that with somebody from south of Iran or from the periphery of the Iranian society, if we miss them, we've missed a lot. That puzzle is still going to be incredibly, glaringly missing a lot of pieces. The question you pose is really involved, and I think that deserves a conference all by itself, because you're asking several questions, important questions. These are very important inquiries that I think we all need to pay attention. And I look forward to having more of a conversation, hopefully in the future with that.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. Is that right, Sydney? Yeah. Okay, great. We can go into the questions, I suppose. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very much for that very lovely and fascinating conversation. Thanks for letting us be a part of that and listen in on that. Yes, you are right. We're headed into our Q&A section. Let me remind the audience of what this will look like. So the Q&A section, as I mentioned, the audience can submit their questions via the Q&A section in our Zoom chat, or the audience can email those questions to media@iran1400.org. And while those questions begin to come in, I can ask one of my own questions, which is one of my favorite things to ask our authors. Dr. Farzaneh, what surprised you most during your research?
What surprised the most? What surprised me the most that the Iranian conservative women that were paid little attention actually turned out to be the most patriotic and most nationalist. Right? The poorest, the least respected in society, from the perspective of people that are not from the same social class. It was a mind-boggling thing to see how sincere, how devoted they are to their country, to their city. But let me also mention this, that doesn't mean that women that came from higher social echelons did not participate, far from it. But I think the great majority that actually jumped in the trenches of war, so to speak, were the women that actually came from the periphery. That was the greatest surprise for me.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Our next question, shedding light on the 80s, the hollowed gap of talking about political activist prisoners generally, and women specifically, is haunting our contemporary historiography, especially as war and prison were interconnected. Would it be possible to talk about the 80s and war and miss what was happening inside prisons?
That's an excellent comment question. We did actually, with Dr. Saeidi, organize a panel at the Middle East Studies Association last year, where Shahla Talibi was one of the panelists, was written extensively about political prisoners. And no, absolutely, you have to talk about the political prisoners. The challenge, if you want to do field research in Iran, is that how do you approach that? Because we recently are witnessing the court proceedings in Sweden of a person that actually was involved in the mass killing in the prisons in 87, 88. That is happening. This thing is not going to go away. It's part of those events that essentially needs a lot of attention. The challenge is, again, we are talking about a system or a government that is still in power, that doesn't shy away from doing a lot of unorthodox things, right? If it sees its interests threatened in that respect. No, I think the political prisoners connection with war is right on. We're not missing that. But at the same time, we have a lot of sensitivities to work with. And that's the challenge. So what happens is, I think there's a lot of work that has been done by political prisoners that have written about those, months, essentially. And there's been really good interviews done inside Iran, talk about those that summer of killing thousands of people in Iranian jails. I suggest people that are interested in this topic listen to those things. Everybody knows that has happened. The government knows it. And these interviews, basically, they talk about it. Yeah, we had to do it simply because we saw the enemy within our prisons as an extension of the enemy that's behind the international lines, right? So the interconnectedness of that is the justification. I'm not agreeing with that, but it's the justification that the Islamic Republic puts forward.
Thank you. The next question, I understand that the Iranian government assists veterans of this war, and I've heard a lot about that myself, but it's always really geared towards men. What kind of assistance are there for, or if there is any, for the women who helped out in the war?
I've talked about that in several places in the book towards the end. there is a veterans affair, so to speak, that tends to the needs of the people that actually sacrifice in the war. I'm sorry to say, very little is done to them. The number that you actually hear, and people are all upset that, you know, if you had gone to war, you're going to have a beautiful life in Iran, Islamic Republic is going to take care of you. That is just simply false. If you know of someone that had participated, let's say as a Sipahi or as a Basiji or as a Jawadi or whatever, and they're getting something, that's a very, very minute percentage, less than 1%, I would say. Remember, over 800,000 families were affected by this, based on the numbers that we talk about. The things that people talk about is a few. I visited several asayishgah, we call them, or veterans houses or nursing homes that are basically specifically for the war veterans. Some of them are very well manicured and taken care of. Some of them are in appalling conditions. It's very, very sad to see those. And actually, that's the same thing that makes Iran as a country that's not very different than the United States itself, because we don't take care of our own veterans here as well. You know, they get the pat on the shoulder. Thank you for your sacrifices. You gave an arm, or you get a leg, or you know, half of your body's gone, but everybody forgets about it, and life kind of overtakes everything, and we forget about them. The same thing is about Iran. The sad thing about the veterans in Iran is that they have this halo around them, that because they fought in the war, they're in full participation with the Islamic Republic, and they love what the Islamic Republic does. That is a false assumption. I wish people would stop doing that, because I can refer you to a ton of martyrs' families, to a ton of disabled people's families that actually don't agree with how things have turned out. They're extremely disappointed with the circumstances that they're living under.
Thank you for that thorough response. Before we go on to our next question, a reminder to the audience, please do submit your questions in the Q&A section, and we will get to them. The next question comes from Marta Simichiva. Was there a pious women's battalion, at least at the home front? A comment, I saw a documentary by a diaspora female director who discussed family dynamics. Her father was secular, her mother pious, and she had video clips of her mother, along with other pious women, training the use of arms. So if you want to call it, what does Martin call it, the Pious Women's Battalion, the Revolutionary Guards, Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, essentially, if you read the book, you will find out that, of course, men had the idea to create the Revolutionary Guards, but at the same time, there was this understanding right immediately after February 11th of 79 that women cannot be totally disregarded when it comes to the security apparatus of the Islamic Republic. There must be a women's battalion or group to do security things, right? And this is true of, let's say, airport security, right? Or women police when they want to do discovery missions within houses or what have you. A man, because of the Islamic moral laws, the man cannot go into a woman's closet, let's say, to find out if there's a gun or other illegal stuff that they need to take. So they would have to have women. So it's like Islamic Republic wanted to eliminate all women from all political, social stuff, but at the same time, Islam does not allow for that because of its own laws, right? So it gets kind of complicated. The battalion that Mara is talking about is the Revolutionary Guards Reserve, had a women's section. I talk about that extensively in chapter 3 or 4 when we talk about Khorramshahr al-Abadan. I interviewed the woman who was the head of this battalion or this group, Fatima Jushi, whose story is an incredible story all by itself. There are other women that were trainers. There were other women that actually were, Fatima Jushi was actually somebody who taught men how to use explosives, which we've never heard of before. There were other women that would actually train other women to be combatants
in the war front. We had women photographers, and I said it's about 18 roles. So they helped each other, train each other to do what was needed in a war setting. So they didn't call them the Pious Women's Battalion, but they were an offshoot or a branch under the umbrella of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which involves Basij as well.
Very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Farzaneh. Our next question comes from Miriam Ala Amjadi. Thank you very much for this fascinating talk. Did you talk to families of women who were martyred in the war? Women martyrs of the war are not commemorated in the same way as male martyrs. Also, I wonder if you talked to families of martyrs who were religious minorities. If so, could you speak on their experiences?
Let me answer the second question first, since I tend to forget. The minorities that actually fought in the war are seldom discussed. And that would be a worthy project for anybody to take on. Maybe someday, I would do it, or somebody else is welcome to do it. The glaring thing about women that actually participated in the war, or men that participated within the minority groups, the only minority group that we do not talk about and we cannot talk about are the Baha'i families, right? So if you see a Baha'i family who has one or two martyrs within the greater family number, usually if things work out, they would introduce them as a Shiite person or as a Muslim person, right? So their Baha'i identity is kind of hidden in the background. You just have to kind of dig in and try to find out. But you cannot talk about it, obviously, for security reasons in Iran. The first question was, did I talk to anyone whose daughters were lost? I did not, actually. The books that I've consulted and the articles and interviews that I watched actually do talk about one specific family is from Desful, I think. Their daughter was martyred in the war, and there are several others that were martyred. The perspective that they have, that why they don't talk about women in the commemoration ceremonies of the war, is the same explanation that I provided earlier. This is a male-driven, male-dominated narrative. It's extremely patriarchal. It looks down on anybody else that doesn't agree with their stance on the war. So that's the shortcoming that we have right now in war studies in Iran.
Thank you for that answer. The next question, could you talk more about the transition that you briefly mentioned in the intro to your book, the transition from the Pahlavi era, where women were in or were able to be in the military, to the era of the Islamic Republic? What was that experience for them? Did you see a lot of people like that who ended up volunteering to do non-active, not as active things in the war? Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't, actually. I knew of two women that were in the Pahlavi police force, right? Working, one in Rezaieh and the other one in Shiraz. No, they did not continue because all of them were fired, obviously, after the war, after the revolution started, and they were kicked out of the military as well. And I didn't see any sources. I haven't seen any books or articles or interviews done by women that were part of the military or security establishment before the revolution that would have continued in the war. I haven't seen anything. If that's the case, maybe if they're inside Iran, probably security concerns is probably what keeps them away from doing that as well. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, though, just because I haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. The next question, the Nezam keeps and promotes the narrative and mentality of the war, sacred defense, alive under the banner of Farhang-e Ithar. To what degree did the experience of the Iran-Iraq war have an impact on contemporary Iranian women's identity?
Well, Farhang-e Ithar, of course, I mean, I don't want to keep repeating what I said earlier. It's a male-dominated Islamic Republic narrative. They own it, right? And they own it for a good reason, because it, in essence, it has solidified the Islamic Republic, and everything that they do is seen within that paradigm that they created during the 8-year war. There's another book that came out about the Revolutionary Guard, where the author does talk about the idea how the Islamic Republic has its own sources that it produces because he wants to own it and he wants to hang on to it. And I think that's natural for them to do, because there's nothing else. In essence, everything is defined based on this Farhangi Isar, and Wafaa is absolutely right about that. To what degree the experience of the Iran Iraq War had an impact on contemporary Iranian women's identity? It allowed them, and it gave them the confidence that we're talking about women that didn't necessarily participate in the society, in the social affairs of the society before the war, before the revolution. So it gave them certain kind of confidence that they're actually just as worthy and capable and smart as anybody else, including men. So that was I think the biggest significance is that it gave a group of Iranian women the notoriety inside their own minds that they actually are capable, and it's not true what they've been told, that they're only women and they can do very little as far as participation is concerned in social affairs.
Thank you. The next question comes from Mansour Farhang. What did Iranian women fighting in the war think of Khomeini's rejection of the ceasefire in June 1982, when Iraqi soldiers were driven out of Iranian territory, and the Persia Gulf states offered Iran $20 billion if Khomeini accepted the UN ceasefire resolution?
Excellent question, Dr. Farhang. In all of these sources that I examined, and I do talk about it in the book also, the biggest disappointment for war veterans was the idea, not accepting the ceasefire offer in 1982, but the essential ceasefire that actually comes at the end, that kind of ends the war in 1988. The disappointment, I think that's when everybody realizes, holy smokes, what have we been fighting for 8 years? We could have done this in 1982, right? Or we could have done it earlier. So why that extra 6 years that we actually fought? The short answer to that is disappointment. They cannot believe that they actually passed on that. However, the official narrative of the war, if you look very carefully and you listen to the decision makers in Iran, they have this explanation, and I think Dr. Zarif talks about that too, the ex-foreign minister, that the Iraqis were still inside Iran to a certain extent. Iran wasn't completely free of the foreign enemy inside its territory, so they would have been negotiating from the position of weakness and not strength so much. I think what Dr. Farhang is mentioning is when Khorramshahr was liberated and the siege of Abadan was broken, and Dasht Abbas was liberated as well. So it wasn't total opportunity for Iran, but definitely in 1988 and after that, when everybody has enough time to reflect onto what they were doing for the past 8 years, the disappointment is tremendous. And that is true for the conservative and for the liberal factions within Iran. Everybody's equally disappointed on that.
Thank you, Dr. Farzaneh. The next question is, can portraying the role of women in the Iran-Iraq War help Iranian women gain more traction in their demand for increased economic and political participation, the same way that the IRGC capitalized on that?
Yes, it can, and it needs leadership, obviously. But they're fighting a beast, right? American women are fighting a beast too, right? Especially with what's been happening for the past week. Talk about rights that women have, that is essentially rights over their bodies. And so it's not like we're totally free and everything's handy dandy anywhere in the world for women, and Iran is just an exclusive thing. No, it's not. For Iran, they're going through the same thing, and their challenges is multiplied by the fact that there is a group of men are deciding to state what is Islamic as opposed to what is un-Islamic, right? So they have that dangling over everybody's head. Do they have a chance to do that? I think there's a lot of great work that's being done by conservative women within Iran trying to get more rights. If you read the book, I think it's the penultimate chapter that I talk about various women inside Iran that are trying to really make changes. And they do mention the idea of women sacrificing in the war, not only in the home front, but only on the front lines of the war.
Thank you. Dr. Saeidi, you're welcome to chime in with a question if you had any that you wish you could have asked. It looks like we still have some more time, and I believe we've answered everything in the Q&A so far.
Yeah, I have other questions, but I think they're doing construction in my building, so I apologize for the construction. Sorry, I had no idea. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yes, I do actually have another question. I hope you can hear my voice well. Dr. Farzaneh, in your book, there's a lot of discussion of the emotional labor that Iranian women that participated in the war have done, particularly the second half of the book, where women talk about, losing their children, waiting for their children to come back, waiting for husbands to get better that are injured veterans. In the men's memoir and discussions from men who participated in the war that we have today, we have videos of it, we know that men also experience this kind of emotional labor. But to me, it seems like there's a disconnect between these discussions, between women and men, because they're not talking to one another about these experiences. To what extent do you think that this is true, and what we could do to kind of facilitate healing? Because I think that a lot of the conflict we have, I agree with one of the participants' question earlier, a lot of the conflicts we have connects to the 1980s and the ways in which gender, politics, and identity were sort of crystallized. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, great question. The thing we have to notice and to take really important note of is that the emotional aspect of the war is constantly hidden, specifically so by the state, because the state wants to make it look like that this was a wonderful experience that everybody had. Everybody was dying to become a martyr. And if there's a war again, God forbid, they're going to all go to war and do the same thing. So I think they've even taken the emotionality, I don't know if that's a word or not, the emotional aspect of the war, they've taken hostage of that, idea that you can't really cry about the war. If you're crying, let's say in national media or, in a program that the state has approved, you have to talk about what our friend Wafa said earlier, the Farhang Isar. We did this and we're going to do it again for X, Y, and Z, and they have their own reasons that they enumerate. Can we make a opportunity for women and men to talk about? I would say yes, but I would see it as a difficult thing if both sides individually can't initiate their own healing process, right? So I think they both have to individually do it first on their own, and then the conversation can happen. I'm not a therapist, but I'm sure a therapist can chime in and tell us maybe there is a way to get two people or two groups of people, in this case, two different genders, to kind of come together to talk about what happened, because I'm still suffering from those PTSDs. My family is still suffering from those PTSDs. I think the Iranian population, there's a great book about, Iran going through this PTSD mode, and they've been doing that since the time of the revolution. That's a fantastic kind of research that needs more work. How do we facilitate that? Again, it is possible to do it, but at the same time, you're talking about a country that is not very easy to get work done in. It doesn't mean that it cannot be done, but again, you're walking in a minefield, so you have to be very careful how you're going to bring them. The connection can come if everybody's talking about Shahadat, martyrdom, right? Or how Hazrat Zainab would have done, X, Y, Z. But anything other than that, the idea of a woman losing their child, or a woman still waiting for the door to open and their kid walking through 30 years later, these are extremely tense experiences that these people are going through, and men are going through it too. I doubt that if there's any man that's just happy that their son is missing still. I know of several families in Isfahan that actually are still waiting for their son to return. And the men are actually in the worst case situation. And that comes from our misunderstanding that maybe men can hide their emotions, and maybe they don't have those emotions. I disagree with that. I think they're just as vulnerable as women are.
Sydney, do I have time for one more quick question? Yes, okay. So talking about the people that were involved in the war, I was wondering if during your field work and interviews you, with women that participated in the war or their loved ones were injured or missing, did you ever notice or have exchanges with their children, with their daughters? And were you able to detect a kind of generational transformation within this particular population?
Almost with the entire body that I interviewed and I talked to in Iran, this subject came up with within the most conservative circles to the most liberal circles, for the lack of a better word, in the government structure in Iran. Without exception, women and men talked about how far they are from their generation, their kids' generation, and the kids that's just sick and tired of hearing about the war in the context that the state wants them to know about it, right? There is in every major city in Iran, in every province, in every, sometimes I've gone to villages, there's like little quasi museums that are set up, martyrs museums. Nobody visits these places unless if you're on a field trip, that the school is mandated to take you to it. There's a chemical war, museum in Tehran. I've gone to it several times and hardly there's anybody in there. There's a significant amount of investment, that's put into that. I think the new generation is kind of post-war generation, post-misery generation. They don't want to talk about it because it brings back a lot of the emotions of their parents that they don't want to have, because they didn't live through the war, right? They're young. So they don't want to, because they know this is going to trigger a lot of emotions within the household. And one specific lady told me when we were doing the interview, we were running late and her phone kept ringing. And I said, if you want to answer it, go ahead and answer it. And I'll just step out. She's like, no, I'll just answer it. You can stay. And I could hear the conversation. The girl was saying, this is like a 16-year-old girl, talking to her mom. It's like, when is this going to be over? You keep talking about the war that happened 40 some odd years ago. I don't want to talk about this in so many words, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, because I need to go buy whatever it is that she was going to go buy. She was waiting for her mom to go shopping. So it's a new generation, and I don't think we can expect that to happen. Look, United States fought a war in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and we're actively trying to forget about it, right? We're kind of moving on. It's like, okay, what's next? Let's talk about the future. We're worried about a lot of things that some of them are worthy to worry about, some of them are not. So I think that's the commonality also, that nobody wants to talk about war. It's very depressing. I just said at the beginning, if you're doing research that makes you cry, makes you depressed, you have to be kind of out of your mind to do it. But it's a necessary genre. It really is.
Do I have time for one more, Sydney?
One more, and then we can end.
Okay, so in your book shows that pious women, and this is a big question because I noticed it. It's the question developed out of me reflecting on your book and on my own book. Your book shows that pious women that participated in the war are more interested in access to space and resources and do not invest significantly in legal change, although they understand gender inequality to rest at the center of discrimination against women. I saw a similar trend in my research on former leftist political prisoners from the 1980 to 88 period as well as among pious youth today. To what extent do you think that women in Iran have experienced a kind of socialization where spatial access becomes a path to freedom and not legal equality or a remaking of citizenship structures?
I think the only place that actually that happens is within the university. You know, I think education becomes extremely important for these women, the new generation especially. Why aren't they fighting the same way they fought in the war for equal rights? Again, that goes to the thing that I said earlier. You know, they're fighting a beast. It's not easy to fight this, and it takes a lot of organization. And one really significant thing that's happening in Iran that you don't see maybe a lot of political activities or social activities that would lead to better things is the devastating economic system, right? If you don't have, as we say, noon shab bukhori, or if you don't have food to eat for the night, you know, everything goes out the door. If we go with the hierarchy of, you know, shelter, food as the most, you know, important, as the base of the pyramid, that applies to the Iranians too. You know, they're going through terrible economic degradation every day, you know, with the incredible inflation. So those same women that actually participated, they are still the poorest, you know, social class within Iran. A lot of people don't know that. You know, they think all of them became millionaires or whatever. That's not true. They participated. They got. I talk about, you know, how some of these women don't even get the VA care that they actually need when they were victims of chemical war agents. And sometimes they call them liars because, oh, you got asthma and you're trying to put that on the war because you participated for a couple of weeks. And that's just a devastating, really upsetting thing to hear. But it is true. Those women essentially that want to do anything within this space that they want to create is only through the university and maybe through the arts. I don't know if that answers your question.
Great. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Farzaneh, for presenting your wonderful book. And thank you, Dr. Saeidi, for joining us today as a discussant with such interesting questions for Dr. Farzaneh. Iran 1400 Project was happy to have y'all. Please, to the audience, if y'all enjoyed this talk, check out Iranian Women and Gender in the Iran-Iraq War published with Syracuse University Press. And also, if you'd like to join us for our next Spotlighting an Author event, that is on June 10th with Robert Steele, and we'll be talking about his book, The Shah's Imperial Celebrations of 1971, Nationalism, Culture, and Politics in Late Pahlavi Iran. If you are new to the Iran 1400 Project and would like to learn more, please go check us out at iran1400.org. We have information in English and in Farsi through the form of articles, videos, podcasts, and events like the one you saw today. We cover issues such as modernity, identity, education, fine arts, the women's movement in Iran, and so much more. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you can actually just include your email and we'll keep you updated with all the events that we have coming up, as well as with all of our new content. And you can also find us on all the major social media platforms at Iran 1400 Project. Specifically, if you find these topics interesting, we have content about both women's movement and the Iran-Iraq War on our website. For the women's movement, you can check out the articles from Engendering Laws to Its Gender Blindness by Mehrangiz Kar, Freedom and the Iranian Women's Movement by Dr. Hoda Mahmoudi, and Iranian Women's Movement, A Century-Long Struggle by Dr. Ali Akbar Mahdi. On the Iran 1400 YouTube page, you can find past Spotlighting an Author events. Dr. Claudia Yacobi's Spotlighting an Author session was on her book, Temporary Marriage in Iran, Gender and Body Politics in Modern Iranian Film and Literature. And we also have several videos in Farsi about the women's movement on our YouTube page. Additionally, you can see our spotlighting an author with Dr. Annie Tracy Samuel. We discussed her book, The Unfinished History of the Iran-Iraq War, Faith, Firepower, and Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Thank y'all again for joining us, and thank you one more time to Dr. Farzaneh and Dr. Shirin Saeidi. Thank you for joining us. And we have a teaser to present to y'all. Thank you again. Please check out the project if you liked what you heard.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you, Shirin.